everybody. Welcome to the It Hurts to Mom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose, and today's guest is RiRi, who is struggling to decide whether or not to have a child while living with chronic pain and illness. RiRi was living her best life in her dream career, traveling all over the world until she got severely ill on what turned out to be her last trip. Following that illness, she became completely disabled for years. In her chronic pain and disability journey, going to many doctors, healers, pain management clinics, nutritionists, physical therapy, etc., she realized there were many people like her whose worlds were turned upside down from chronic pain and disability. She created and recently launched the Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose podcast in an effort to empower those suffering in silence, provide a supportive environment to share individual stories, share resources, and learn from professionals who work with reimaginers. The podcast is made by and for people in the process of adapting to their new realities or reimagining life in a way that works for them. Thank you for coming on, RiRi.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be an interesting topic. I'm not sure where we're going to land at the end of this, and that's okay. It's really just for, people to think about this really important topic. If you're disabled or live with chronic pain, chronic illness, where does parenting fall in this journey? So
Yeah.
first, can I ask how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 40.
Okay. So with medical miracles these days, that is still perfectly okay. I had a friend who had a child at 41 and everything is, going great. So let's go through some kind of basic logistics. What does your
Mhm.
support system look like friends and family to help you out?
Yeah, so I think I have a pretty good support system. I've got parents who are very supportive and in the picture, though they're, getting older. So depending on when this might be, I can't ask them to be like full-time childcare, but they would certainly help out in any way that they can as long as they're physically able. Um, I have a bunch of close friends who, each everyone has their own busy life, but I think they could really sort of bring together piece by piece sort of a village. So I would have support. I have a boyfriend who is very supportive. He's also very busy though. um so it's just kind of like life. Everyone is busy doing their own thing in their own world, and it's a big question of, would is it is it possible? Is it feasible for me to do this given where I am? And sometimes I have an invisible disability. So many people see me and think that nothing's wrong, and sometimes I am able to function and sometimes I just can't. So it's, how do I manage that while also managing my own self-care needs?
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic that you have such a great community. That's absolutely vital. That's helped me a lot, raising a child with chronic pain the entire time that she's been alive. I've had some kind of chronic pain.
Yeah.
Um, so do you have room for a child or would you have to move?
Um, I would, I mean, I could physically make it work. I probably would choose to move just to have a bit more space. That that I kind of find sort of less daunting. Like once I make a decision and I'm, gung ho and ready for it, then I feel like those types of pieces, like I can find a way to make that work. That to me seems less of a major challenge.
Right. So, on to a major challenge. How do you see yourself physically struggling to take care of a child?
Yeah. So my condition is very inconsistent, I guess I would say. I never know when I'm going to have bad days or bad weeks, or it just sort of depends on so many things because there's so many triggers. So I think the biggest challenges for me in terms of also being a parent would be stamina. I don't have the same stamina I used to have before I got sick. even focusing for too long, my brain just kind of gets filled up, and then at a certain point it's kind of like, okay, need a break. um Noise, like I'm thinking of crying or loud noises, and definitely like sleep is very important for me. And I know that lack of sleep is like number one challenge with kids. So how do I make those things work? And I think I've talked to a number of friends who have kids, and I think in the early stages of having kids, it's kind of survival mode for everyone, whether or not they have a disability or not. It's just like, okay, we're gonna get through this. And then, so the challenge for me is sort of, I sometimes am in my own survival mode, just dealing with my chronic condition. So, you know, what would I do when I am in sort of in double survival mode? How would I handle that? So maybe it's a question of putting backups in place. Um, I'm not really sure what it would look like. I know that it would have to be different than the typical picture that people have of parenting, but I think that's okay. And I think that, lots of kids grow up in different circumstances. It's just a question of, how do I make sure that this isn't like an additional stress and tension that maybe could make my own condition worse?
Yeah, and those are all really good points because yeah, when they're a baby, your sleep is crazy because you sleep when the baby sleeps, which is like a couple hours at a time. And that's
Hmm.
not how an adult is built to sleep. We're built to sleep for, 7, 8, 9, or if you're like me, 10 hours
Yeah.
at a time. And that's not how babies sleep. So I completely agree, it is survival mode.
Yeah.
Where on the spectrum do you fall with regards to your desire to have a child? Like, you don't want a child is on one end, you could live with or without one in the middle, or it's like a burning desire on the other end.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think I would say if it's sort of a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is I'm not interested in having a child and 5 is like I must have a child,
Mhm.
I would say I'm probably like a 4. But I also feel like my life has changed so much so unexpectedly that I really I can't plan long term because I don't know, how am I going to feel? Am I going to be better? You know, how is all this going to work? It's really hard to try to plan long term when you're sort of training yourself to live in the moment to get through certain things.
Right. So if you're a 4, then you definitely have an interest in having a child. So in my situation, I had a baby. I was almost 33. I was 6 days away from being 33. And at the
Mm,
time, I just had migraines. So as far as noise went, earplugs were my number one go to when it came to loud noises and crying and things like that.
mhm.
But then when she was 3, I started developing the spinal pain and then the joint pain and then the fibromyalgia after that.
Mm,
And we were actually planning on having 2 children. When we got married and started talking about kids, we were going to have 2. But as my body pain really set in and became debilitating, we had to have the conversation, like, and it was really hard, but I had to tell my husband, I can't physically take care of another child. I can't take care of a baby right now. At least our
yeah.
daughter is, 4 or 5 years old, and she can do some things for herself. She's more independent. And that was really hard for me. I grieved for a long time. Sometimes now, even when I go to a ladies retreat and I see a woman with a baby there, I mean, my womb, my heart, they just ache because I wanted a
Mm,
second child. So
yeah.
I, I don't know what I would have done if I'd had the body pain before I had my first child because, we desperately wanted children.
Yeah.
So that was definitely in our life plan. But I mean, I think this is a really difficult question. So I still grieve that because
Mm,
that's what we'd planned
yeah.
on. That's what we'd agreed to. And it was a hard conversation when I find it took me a couple of years to finally even start getting rid of the baby stuff, because I knew
Mm,
once I started getting rid of all the baby stuff, that was it. We were done.
yeah. Well, it sounds like
And
it was sort of a goal or dream of yours, and that's really sort of really hard to let go of.
I'm happy with my family now. I mean, my daughter is more than I could ever even dream of. She's
Mm.
fantastic, you know, and I think in the long run, it's worked out like it was supposed to, because she's very needy and very jealous. Like, she used to be so bad that she wouldn't even let me say another baby was cute, because she thought
Oh,
that meant I didn't love her. And one time I was holding like my cousin-in-law's baby, and she's like, "Mommy," she was 5. She's like, "Mommy, put that baby down."
oh,
She's gotten a little bit better, but she's I don't know how she would deal with having a baby that takes so much attention away from her in
yeah.
the house. So I think everything worked out like it was supposed to, but you know, that doesn't mean I still don't grieve the
Yeah,
dream of having that other child.
absolutely. Yeah.
Do you imagine your child being a baby, or could you be happy adopting or fostering an older child who can do basic tasks by themselves?
So this is a good question, and one that I've been thinking about. Adoption is definitely something that has always been sort of in the picture for me. Philosophically, I believe in it and very much want to help children who are just looking for someone to love them and become a family with. I know it's obviously a lot more complicated than that.
Mhm.
In terms of, an age of a child, that's one that I'm still kind of, I don't think I've made my mind up yet. My hesitations and my sort of pondering this is also thinking about the psychological impacts on the child. Like if it's an older child, I'm not sure how old, how does that impact them, whatever their situation is, but having not come from having a loving parent there from the time that they're born,
Mhm.
and sort of how does that impact the child's development and sort of how to deal with that. And I know I actually really wanted to ask you about your experience because I know that you were adopted and it's been a really important thing that you've been dealing with.
Yeah, so I was adopted. So my birth mom was 15 when she got pregnant. She was barely 16 when she had me.
Oh
So
wow.
she didn't even find out she was pregnant until she was 6 months pregnant.
Mm,
So she had like 3 months to really process that she was having a baby.
wow.
So she pretty much immediately decided on adoption. I just found her in 2020 through a DNA
Wow.
match to a first cousin, but she was telling me recently that the guy she was dating at the time, who was older, he was 19, was actually willing to marry her and raise me. He actually signed my birth certificate as if he were the real father,
Wow.
because the birth father didn't know anything about me. And he was ready to stand up and make that commitment. But she was like, I'm 16. I got to finish school. I don't have a job, etc. So she was set on adoption.
Yeah.
And so when I was born, the nurse left the room for just barely a couple of minutes. A friend of hers took some Polaroid photos. If you don't know what a Polaroid is, ask your parents, kids. and and then the nurse came back in and immediately took me from her arms. And she didn't get a chance to bond with me or anything, which was probably the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into foster care for about 9 weeks, and I was adopted when I was 9 weeks old.
Mm.
So to give my parents, a lot of credit, I've known I was adopted my entire life. It's just
Mhm.
been part of the conversation. And I think that was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And I think that being adopted as a baby also benefited me because I was in a loving foster care and then went into, so loving parents' arms. And so my brother has had 6 children be
Whoa.
adopted out. Yes, they've all been
Wow.
adopted out because neither he nor the birth moms are fit to be parents basically at this point in their lives. And his um I guess his third child, his first set were twins. So his
Ooh,
third child went into foster care for a couple of years. And that was a really bad situation. When my cousin ended up adopting her, she was having night terrors.
oh,
And she did have to adjust to, having new parents slash guardians and having siblings. And I know she tested the waters a lot. Like if her brother would do something naughty and get in trouble, she would try it to see if she would get in trouble. And she's 18 now. And a few years ago, because of some mental health issues on her part, the state got control of her, and she's had a lot of anger
oh wow.
about all of that. So she she's had a much more difficult situation because she's been in, because her birth mom was I think 15 when she got pregnant also, and
Mhm.
the state decided that they were gonna not let her keep this baby basically. And
Wow.
so I do think an older child being adopted is more complex. There
Mhm.
are a lot more emotional and psychological things that are going on with an older child. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, an older child is, more independent and can do things on themselves. But I also know that older kids in foster care, a lot of them are more rebellious
Mhm.
because of just all the emotional pain that they've been going through.
Yeah.
So it's really a complex situation, and adoption agencies are not saints by any stretch of the imagination.
Ugh,
Generally, the adoption agencies are transaction based. A baby is just a transaction to them.
wow.
And I recently found that out for my brother's most recent child. His baby mama was on meth and marijuana the entire time she was pregnant.
Oh,
The rules of the adoption agency were she couldn't be doing that, but they just basically stopped drug testing her, and they took that baby. And I don't even know if they told the adoptive parents that
wow.
that baby had experienced that.
Yeah.
And my adopted brother was a baby of a mother who was on drugs also, and he definitely had a lot more crying issues and just, emotional things going on and physiological things going on from
Yeah.
being a baby who was born to a mother on drugs. And so he was going through withdrawal, even, I think probably to the point where we got him at 9 months old.
Wow.
So, you
It's
know,
so
you
hard.
yeah, you know, you want to think that adoption agencies and foster agencies in the state are all in it for the children, but that's not necessarily always the case.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean,
haven't explored any of the agencies that actually do it because it's for me, I've been more thinking about like the idea of doing it and, would I feel comfortable and, what are the things to keep in mind? And I mean, it's just really tragic for these babies who are born. They have no control over their situation. They're just born into the world and can end up with such challenging situations. But then also, on the other hand, that can happen with anybody's child. Like if someone gives
mm,
birth to a baby, they could have any kind of whether it's a disability or they have a complex medical situation, or, you don't know. I mean, yes, you'd know if you were taking drugs, and that's a big one. But
Yeah.
you really don't know. It's sort of like an evolving situation that, I'm sure can be incredibly challenging to deal with. And I also think about, what if I had a child who ended up being like me, who
Mm.
had all these special needs and has needed tons of doctors and tests and all this stuff? Like, would I financially be able to take care of them? Would I physically be able to take care of them? I mean, I'm just very aware of all that goes into it. And, it's life is hard sometimes. I mean, it's not an easy thing we're talking about. We're talking about raising a tiny human. And at the same time, like, it's also so exciting because you can help form this little person and hopefully give them the love and support that they need to be their best selves. But it's no small task.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And just even with typical parents and children that don't, have illnesses and disabilities, financially, it's really hard to take care of a kid, but you figure it out. When the
Mhm.
baby's a child's a baby and you're not sleeping, it's really hard, but you figure it out. Every stage of life, is difficult in its own way, but you find a way to figure it out. And
Yeah.
somehow things just all work out.
Yeah. I think that's probably very, very wise and true.
Mm. So, do you have any opportunities to be like an aunt or a godmother or just a trusted adult in the life of a child you already know?
Yeah. So I am an aunt. I have two, I have a niece and a nephew. Um, I also, a number of friends have kids. And also, my current partner has a 2-year-old child that he shares custody with the mother. So, I do have a good amount of time that I try to spend with kids of various ages. My niece and nephew are much older now. And I really enjoy the time that I spend with them and with other kids and with my partner's child. I really enjoy that. I think it's fun. I think it's a great challenge. Like, how can you teach them these things that you really hope that they'll learn and benefit from? And so, yes, I definitely have that exposure.
Mhm.
Um, but it's different, it's not my
Mhm.
child. So they sort of go back to their parents, and I continue on doing my thing when they're not around. So it's
Right.
very different, but yes, I do enjoy spending time with kids when I'm able to, and I hope to do more of it.
Yeah, it is very different. I guess my only point with that question is if you decided that having your own child wasn't the right thing for you, then I'm glad there are opportunities for you to be a parental like influence in other children's lives.
Mhm.
There are great ways to be a trusted adult and an influence for a child without being the actual parent. And there's
Yeah.
even benefits to that child going back to, to their parents at the end of the
For
day,
sure.
you know?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have to deal with the big problems. And also, there are programs where you can sort of be a mentor or a like big sister or something like that to kids who would really benefit from an additional supportive adult in their life. And that's the kind of thing that I would love to do whether or not I have a child of my own. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff, and I really believe in trying to offer what I can to help others. I enjoy it, and I think it's what's more important.
No, I think that's great. So tell us about your podcast. Where can we find it? What's it about?
Yeah. So the podcast is Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose. It came out of my own experience. I've spent years working on managing my chronic pain and disability, going to tons of different doctors, tests, Eastern medicine, Western medicine, everything basically you could do. And I've met a lot of people throughout that journey who are in a similar situation with as myself, people who were just living whatever their normal life was. They were living their normal life. All of a sudden, they get sick with something that's pretty intense. And then one way or another, their body sort of freaks out and becomes a chronic thing that, whether it's that the pain receptors are misfiring or whatever the, you know, cause of the situation is, that really doesn't matter. The fact is they're struggling living with all this pain and impact on their life, which is totally turned upside down. And so I felt like, being in those situations, there's so few resources or places where I could go or these people could go to find out how do I apply for disability? How do I help myself? How do I get in touch with other people who might be dealing with a similar thing? Like, who can I talk to? And it's really, really hard and really isolating to be in that position. And so I felt like, I want to do something about this. Like, I've learned a lot over the years that I've been dealing with this and trying to manage my condition. And so I kind of felt like, I don't have the answers, but I have experience and I can share that with people. And I want to try to find people who have answers or information that can be helpful to others. So that's where the idea of the podcast came from. It's really about, at its core, it's about adapting to whatever life throws at you. So it's empowering people who often live in silence. And those are the ones who often live with chronic pain and disability. So it's a place to share stories, personal stories, resources, um, talk to professionals who work with these populations about what have they found most helpful for their patients or the people that they work with. Really getting into a deeper level of conversation. How have things shaped people and what have they done with that? And I've met some amazing people, I have to say, like you, who also started your own podcast. And it's inspiring, people facing huge challenges. They're creative, they don't let things stop them, and they just plow ahead and like forge a new path. And so that's been really motivating. And also, I feel like these stories should be told. Like, I feel like disability is often sort of something that's a bit taboo, like, oh, don't talk about it. But no, I think we need to talk about it and we need to make our voices heard. And hopefully things will improve. There's a lot of room for improvement, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So you can find us at Reimagining Life Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook. Uh, our episodes are on Spotify and all of the streaming platforms. We also have a link tree that's linktree/Reimagining Life Podcast. And so in each episode, I talk to various people, whether they're sharing their personal story and how they dealt with a specific challenge, or a professional who might be sort of helping educate people about how their service can help people with chronic illness. So it's been fun, and I've learned a lot, and it's a work in progress. So I invite everyone to check it out. I'm really interested in hearing feedback. And yeah, it's it's been a great challenge for me.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely know the feeling. And it's exactly why I started my podcast, because we don't talk about chronic pain and illness enough.
Hmm.
We do suffer in silence and live in silence because we don't want to bring down the room. We don't want to burden other people. We don't want people to judge us or think that we're just complaining. There's all sorts of reasons. But, statistically, 1 in 5 people has chronic pain. That's 20% of the world's population. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
shocking.
we need, I know that statistic is probably why I started my podcast, because I'm like, this has been a really lonely journey for me the last almost 30 years. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't have been, because there are so many people with similar situations.
Yeah, exactly. And, also I think some of the people that you interact with or you meet are just so cool. Like this one woman in one of the episodes, she is a quilter. And so she was talking about how creativity can really help as a tool for managing chronic pain. And also she was in a state where there was some ridiculous law that allowed insurance companies to basically not pay for your medications.
Mm.
And I mean, it was terrible. She got so much worse because she had to go off her medications. And so once she was able to get back on and she sort of recovered, which wasn't a small thing, she was like, how can I change this? And she went about becoming an advocate, and she got trained in how to do this, and she became like really influential, and she was able to get that law changed. So
Wow.
so no one else in that state can suffer through that again. And I think that is just like the best example ever. Like it took
Yeah.
a huge amount of work, and she's a go-getter, but good for her. Like that is
Yeah.
awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's really inspiring people, which is great to be so connected when we're so isolated feeling. And yeah, it just inspires me to keep meeting new people, making further connections and figuring out how can we make this situation better? Because if we don't do it, no one else is going to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our talk today.
I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming on and talking about this very important and sensitive subject.
Yeah, I really appreciate your having me and sharing about your experience and how it's impacted you. And yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a huge decision and so important. And yeah, I'm still thinking about it, and you've given me some other things to consider, so that's really helpful too. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any health, parenting, or life advice. For my freebie, 30 ways to relieve pain without taking a pill, go to ithurtstomom.com/tips. If you have any comments, suggestions, or want to be on this podcast, please email me at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. I wish you all a blessed and pain-free day. Bye.